In this video, we'll be looking at the concept of care plan structures and how these are set up and used within Platt. Before you'll be able to create care plans, you will need to define at least one care plan structure. Care plan structures are essentially templates. They define what data a care plan should contain. Defining care plan structures can be done in one of two ways. Either you start from a blank canvas, or you can use a copy of an existing care plan structure as your starting point. To select from scratch, choose Setup, Care Plan Structures, and then click New. Give your care plan structure a name and select the relevant organization. Initially, all new care plan structures will be in experimental mode. To understand why the experimental mode is provided, it is necessary to understand the relationship between a care plan and the structure upon which it is based. A care plan structure includes, amongst other things, a list of fields. Each field is a piece of information that you would like to be captured in the completed care plan. Fields have a name and a label, together with many other properties that we will be looking at in just a moment. When a new care plan is saved, the data is stored according to the field name set up in the corresponding care plan structure. Therefore, if a field name was to be changed after a care plan had been created using that structure, the data for that particular field would become homeless, meaning it would no longer appear when viewing or printing the saved care plan. Experimental mode is therefore provided to allow a care plan structure to be modified only during its design phase. While in this mode, you will be able to create new care plans using this structure, but the expectation is that you will only be doing this with test data. If you attempt to publish a care plan using a structure that is in experimental mode, a warning will be shown. You are strongly encouraged to take your care plan structure out of experimental mode once you are happy that it is correctly set up. Remember, you cannot put a care plan structure back into experimental mode, so only untick this box when you're sure that the structure is ready for live use. If you need to revise a structure in the future, you will need to make a copy and revise that, rather than modifying the original structure. We'll look at this process later on. The Care Plan Sections tab is where you define all of the fields that you want completed care plans to contain. Click on the Add New Section button to begin. When a new care plan is created, there will be a tab for each of the sections defined here. So these sections are the highest level grouping of related fields. Perhaps your care plan structure will have one section for demographic information, one for relationships, another for spiritual, religious, and other background information, and so on. For now, sections are given nothing more than a label. Let's call ours Demographics. Click on the tick to confirm your entry. Afterwards, the label can be modified by clicking here. To add a new field directly to a section, click here. The first thing that you need to specify when adding a field is the field name. This must be unique and can consist only of letters, numbers, and the underscore character, so no spaces. For a field to contain the service user's family name, we might use family underscore name, or perhaps family name with a capital N. Label is optional. If you don't specify a label, the field name will be converted to title case for this purpose. That conversion is shown here, so you can check that it is suitable. Labels don't need to be unique and can contain any characters that you want, including spaces. Person field and referral field will be used for fields that can be pre-filled with data taken either from the service user record or from the service user's most recent referral. In the case of family name, we would like data to be pre-filled from the service user record, so let's make the relevant selection here. Data type is used to specify what type of information will be captured. The default text refers to a single line of text. For longer, multi-line text, use text area. There are also options for dates, numbers, and yes/no entry, which will be presented to the care manager as a checkbox. If you want the care plan author to select from some predefined options, choose either select or one of the two radio options. You can provide a guide to the type of information that should be entered for this field by entering some help text. Mandatory fields should be nominated by ticking here. Users will be able to save a draft care plan regardless of whether values have been provided for all of the mandatory fields. However, it will be not possible to publish a care plan if there is any missing data. Once the field definition is complete, tick here. Let's add some additional fields to our demographics section. Firstly, given name, and also date of birth. In the case of date of birth, we must of course choose the date data type. Sometimes fields should allow multiple entries. Service users might have more than one alias. Let's add a field for this information now, and we're going to tick the Allow Multiple Entries box. The meaning of required when allow multiple entries has been ticked is that at least one value will be required. We should also specify a plural label for this field. You'll have noticed that new fields are added by default at the end of the current section. If you need to change the order of fields, use drag and drop. Let's move aliases above date of birth. Sometimes a number of field values will combine to describe some bigger entity. For example, service users have a home address. That will consist of fields for street, town, county, and so on. Often it will be helpful to group together related fields, which we do using a container. To add a new container to a section, we click here. As with sections, all containers have a label. And containers come in two styles. Headings have a large font and a thick border, while groups are far more discreet. They are really just a thin box around some related fields. Another important distinction between groups and headings is that a heading can be nested below another heading, essentially allowing for the definition of subheadings and sub-subheadings. Groups can only contain fields. Let's define a group as a container for our service user's home address. Once defined, groups have this icon to the left-hand side of their label. Let's add some text fields to our group. One for street, another for town, and a third for postcode. To make changes to a field, we can click on its pencil icon. Let's change street to street 1. Now we can add a second street field. The new field is added to the bottom of the parent container. Again, we can use drag and drop to rearrange as necessary. Fields can also be moved into and out of containers. Notice what happens when I take the postcode field and drop it onto the demographics heading. This tells Platt to remove the field from the container that it is in and place it directly against the chosen section. Notice how postcode is no longer indented at the same level as town. A completed care plan structure is likely to consist of dozens of fields, many of which will be nested 2, 3, or even 4 levels deep, using sections, headings, and groups. It's easy to lose track of a field's place in this hierarchy, but reminding yourself of this is as easy as hovering the mouse over the icon to the left-hand side of the field or container name. Notice how postcode is not shown in the home address group, whereas town is. Let's move postcode back into the home address group. If we drop it onto the header for that group, it will be added as the last field. If we had wanted to choose a different position for it, we could have dropped it above or below any of the other fields. The trash can icon allows us to delete a field, a container, or even an entire care plan section. Be careful, individual fields will be deleted without confirmation, and there's no way to restore a deleted field other than by cancelling all of your changes. If you attempt to delete a container or a section that contains at least one child, a warning will appear. The demographics section is now complete, so let's move on to the second section of our care plan structure. We'll be using this section to capture service users' background information. Here we'll add a number of multi-line text fields, each for capturing comments relating to the service users' living arrangements, their personal preferences, their lifestyle, and so on. The first field in this section will be used to describe service users' living arrangements. Although there is no field in Platt that specifically deals with this category of information, perhaps your commissioners provide this information to you as part of a new referral. If so, nominate the field as one that is pre-filled from referral data by selecting the relevant referral field here. Let's add 2 more fields to this section, both of which will also be pre-populated with referral data. Firstly, mobility. And secondly, physical health. We'll now add one final section to our care plan structure, this time with the label Care and Support Plan. This section of the care plan is where all of the service users' needs, concerns and problems will be outlined. If each need, concern or problem was going to consist of nothing more than a description, we could use a simple text area field for this with Allow Multiple Entries ticked. However, for needs, concerns and problems, we want to capture more than just a description. Anytime you have an entity that requires more than one field and which can also have more than one value, a container should be used, with that container's Allow Multiple Entries box ticked. In this case, we're going to be nesting another container within the one that we add here, and that means we must use the heading container type rather than a simple group. So let's add a new heading to our Care and Support Plan section and call this one Needs, Concerns and Problems. We'll allow multiple entries, and on the basis that service users will surely have at least one need, concern or problem, let's tick the required box as well. So we now have a heading for our needs, concerns and problems within the Care and Support Plan section. Next, we need to put something below this heading to flesh out what a need, concern or problem should consist of. Perhaps the most obvious thing to include here will be a field for describing what the particular need, concern or problem actually is. So let's add a field for this. The field name can be description, and as with the fields that we added to the background tab, we'll use text area so that multiple lines of text can be captured. If a service user has multiple needs, concerns and problems, it may be necessary to prioritize these. Let's add a numeric importance field for this purpose. Once a need, concern or problem has been described and given an importance, we want there be a way to record the service user's desired resolution. This will be done in the form of a list of goals, as there may be more than one goal for each need, concern or problem, and each goal will consist of more than just a single field. We're going to again need to use a nested container. This we can achieve by clicking on Add New Container alongside the container that we just added. Notice how the Needs, Concerns and Problems heading has a large 1 alongside it, whereas the new heading that we're now adding has a 2. These numbers indicate the level of nesting. Needs, Concerns and Problems sits directly within the Care and Support Plan section at level 1, whilst this new heading is a child of Needs, Concerns and Problems at level 2. We'll call this child heading Goals, and again allow multiple entries. Notice the pink notation alongside the Needs, Concerns and Problems label. 1 ... rec indicates that all service users will require one or more needs, concerns and problems. Blue 0 ... indicates that each need, concern or problem can have 0, 1 or more goals. As before, it makes sense to add a field here for each goal to be described. I said earlier that field names must be unique, but this restriction actually only applies within a particular container, and because I am adding this field to a different container than the description field that I added earlier, I am able to use the same field name as before. Don't worry too much about this. If you try to use a field name that is not allowed, you will be prevented from doing so. Let's now add a third level of nesting for our Care and Support Plan section. Perhaps for each goal, some optional actions and activities can be defined. As before, we'll be adding a child container, this time with the description, actions and activities. And again, we'll be allowing multiple entries. We'll also need a description field here. Before we wrap up, let's add one final field to our care plan structure. Once the actions and activities have been performed for a particular goal, that goal may have reached some form of resolution. It might then be appropriate to record a status for that goal, so let's add a field for that now with a description of status. To provide our care managers with some predefined choices for this field, we should choose Select as the data type, and then enter the choices delimited by commas in this box. Let's say that each outcome can either be successfully completed, not achieved, or no longer relevant. Now we have defined 3 sections for our care plan structure. Let's turn our attention to the Predefined Outcomes tab. This tab is used to describe the outcomes that should apply by default to all new care plans of this type. Let's add 3 predefined outcomes. Be treated with dignity and respect, maintain independence, and retain and develop social interactions. Any notes that are entered here will become the default notes for these outcomes when added to a new care plan. However, there will still be an opportunity to personalize those notes on a per service user basis. Ultimately, those personalized notes will become accessible to care workers through the Platt mobile app. The Predefined Task Types tab is used to describe tasks that will often be required by service users with a care plan of this type. Unlike predefined outcomes, predefined task types will only be added automatically to new care plans if default is ticked. For predefined task types that are chosen as defaults, a required option will also be provided. Ticking this box will prevent this type of task from being deleted or given an alternative description when a new care plan is being set up. Perhaps you have certain global tasks that your organization requires to be completed for all service users without exception. Taking this one step further, predefined task types that have both the default and required options selected will also provide a mandatory for every visit option. Where mandatory for every visit is left unticked, your care managers will be able to choose a less frequent recurrence pattern for this task type as appropriate to the individual service user. Let's set up a mandatory for every visit task for arrive safely and another for leave safely. Service users' kitchens will probably be tidied regularly, but not necessarily during every visit. So let's predefine a task type for this, but we'll leave mandatory for every visit unticked. Most, but not all service users will require a drink to be prepared. So let's add a default prepare a drink task, but we'll leave required unticked. When creating a care plan for service users who don't require this task, it can simply be deleted. Here we can classify the task type. This may provide benefit when reporting on task data. Nutritional and hydration are mutually exclusive. Whilst a drink will be prepared for most service users, meal preparation will probably not be required by the majority. So let's set up a prepare a meal task type without ticking default. Care managers will be able to add this type of task where relevant by selecting it from a list. The minimum number of care workers option will require events where this task type is performed to have more than one care worker. If there are no events scheduled that have the required number of care workers, an alert will be generated. Let's set up a hoist into bed task type requiring a minimum of 2 care workers. Our care plan structure is now complete. However, there is one optional and one mandatory step that we'll need to perform before it can be used to create actual care plans. The optional step concerns how care plans of this type will be created. In the future, it is our intention to provide a lightweight app suitable for use on a tablet or small laptop and capable of running in offline mode for completion of care plans in the field. Until such an app is available, your care managers will have 2 options for care plan entry. If they have access to Wi-Fi or mobile data, they can use Plaid. Otherwise, they can download a blank care plan template, fill this in using OpenOffice or similar word processing tool, and then import the completed document back into Plaid. If you intend to take the template approach for care plan entry, Plaid can provide a default template based upon everything that you have entered here. You'll probably want to customize this template, perhaps adding your company logo, additional supporting text, and changing some of the font sizes and styles. After saving your care plan structure, you can download a default document template for it by selecting here. You will receive the document shortly afterwards as an email attachment. The final step before this structure can be used to create new care plans will be to choose which organization or organizations it will apply to. Go to the Care Plans tab of the relevant organization and add an item to the available care plan structures list at the bottom of the page. Choose your new care plan structure by typing in its name here. If you have customized the default template for this structure, you should upload that by clicking here. If different care plan structures are required by different service users from this organization, you can add further options to the list. At the point of creating a draft care plan for a service user whose organization has more than one available care plan structure, you'll be required to choose which structure to use. As I mentioned earlier, there is a high chance of data loss if care plan structures are modified after they have been used to define care plans for real service users. If you need to modify an in-use care plan structure, you should take a copy of the existing record, modify that copy, and then add it to the list here. You can phase out the old structure and phase in the new one by entering dates here. As you will have probably begun to realize, the task of setting up a new care plan structure from scratch is a significant undertaking. You might find it easier to use a pre-existing care plan structure as a starting point for your own. With this possibility in mind, we will be providing all organisations with access to a care plan structure that replicates version 2 of the Personalised Care and Support Plan, as outlined by the Professional Record Standards Body, better known as the PRSB. If you'd like to use the PRSB's recommended care plan structure as a starting point for your own, select Setup, Care Plan Structures, select this item, and then choose Copy Structure here. Give your copy its own name and remember to add it to your organisation's list of available care plan structures after you have made the required modifications. In the next video, we'll look at the task of completing and publishing care plans for individual service users.